And people ask me all the time how much I made in that year and a half. And I honestly, I don't know. I made money. Cash that went through my hands, probably like $500,000 in cash.
I'm a former Detroit police officer and rode with the 1%er motorcycle club. During that time, I was involved in a lot of altercations. I had a gun shoved in my face. The trigger was pulled, and I got a plate under my left eye. I'm Manny Vitale, and this is my story. Hey, everybody, how you doing? I'm Manny Vitale, host of My Fight, Our War. And we're back here in Connecticut, and things are going to look a little bit different back and forth from the previous show we did. But we're back in studio, and I'm glad to do that because we got our guest today, Nelson Rodriguez. And not only that, we get the new brand, Honor Among Thieves. So we're going to be talking about that as well. And there's a reason that his show, Honor Among Thieves, insight from someone with his experiences can only tell. Nelson, thanks for coming on, man.
What's up, brother?
I know this is round two.
Round two.
But no one knows that because round one took a little shit.
It never happened. Officially, round one never happened. So this is the official round one.
And good thing because it was meant to be because this is the new brand, Honor Among Thieves, man.
Yep.
We were just talking about that badass name, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thinking about it with your platform, it's perfect.
It is,
it's
right?
perfect. So
It's
congratulations
so me, man.
on the brand.
I appreciate that. Thank you, brother. It's so me. That name is so me. It's honor. So the reason it rings, right, is because of the old adage, no honor among thieves. What I want to do with my podcast is show you that people who have done time or have been criminals in the past, they're not what you think they are. A lot of people have made mistakes, gone to prison, done time, committed crazy, crazy crimes. And if you get a chance to get to know them, you're going to be very confused because society wants to paint people who have done time, people who have broken the law as this kind of person. But yeah, that's who I was at a point in my life. That's not who I am anymore.
Yep.
You know, so Honor Among Thieves is basically trying to show you there is redemption. Redemption is real. You can do horrible things and become a different person. You can. It is possible.
That's so true.
You know,
and that's, it's the same thing with my show, My Fight, Our War. When people think of addicts, addiction, even with mental health, they look at you with this stereotype, and it's just like this type of person. When you pretty much just described it with your brand. Right. It's like, no, we are people too that with addiction, we made poor choices, just like going to prison with yours, so, and a lot of times with our choices we made with addiction, end up going to prison and stuff. So, yeah, man, it's a way it coincides with something.
And that's a cool thing about our brands. They kind of coincide. A lot of addicts end up in prison. So a lot of addicts end up being criminals. Yep. And even if they don't, they do have the crazy stories of the kind of stuff they did to score drugs. And so I like that about you and me, how we're not the same, yet there's so many similarities, and so many things that we can understand. Oh, yeah. Because someone who habitually breaks the law, and from what I've seen, right, like I have close friends who have been to prison and been to prison multiple times. It's not their first bid. So I've gotten to see how some of my friends think, and it's actually kind of like addict behavior in a way. Yeah. First and foremost, if some of these people felt like somebody gave a fuck about them, they probably wouldn't break the law anymore. A lot of guys I know wouldn't be in prison right now if it weren't for like, all right, nobody gives a shit about me. I'm just going to go back to selling drugs. I'm going to go back to robbing people. I'm going to go back to whatever they were doing before they got arrested. So that's first and foremost. Addicts have a similar thing, right? Where it's like, nobody gives a shit about me. I'm just going to shoot heroin until I die.
Yeah, you get that low self-esteem. So if you're already low, I can only go lower. But no, we can go higher. And for me, and again, this is now just thinking about this with the similarities with our shows and with us is with My Fight, Our War. Right. Who better to talk to about addiction and all this stuff than someone who dealt with it? That was me all day. Well, Honor Among Thieves, man, talking about the correlation between being in prison and not being in prison and what goes on in there. Yep. You went through it. So I mean, we might as well jump right into that, and
Definitely.
how with Honor Among Thieves came about, and it was not because of the guests that you interviewing or on your show. It's because your own personal experience.
100%.
So let's fire it out with that.
Definitely. So, I mean, Honor Among Thieves is born because of the stories. The stories you hear in prison are just insane, right? I'll tell you one. I have a friend of mine that I'm going to have on the podcast soon. Orphan, no parents, becomes a massive drug dealer, makes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, goes to the federal penitentiary, like crazy shit. Just like a kid who was supposed to be counted out becomes rich beyond his dreams. Like, it's all these stories I kept hearing. A good friend of mine did 32 years. He just got out. Kenny, what's up, brother? He just got out. He did 12 and 18, if I'm not mistaken. He did 12 years, got out for 18 months, did another 18, and now he's out. He was the last signature that Biden signed before he left office. So he's literally like the last person that got let out with clemency. And that guy, I'm 32 years old. That guy's been in prison longer than I've been alive.
That's crazy.
These are the stories that I have to. I went to, and I said, I was already podcasting, and I had the Montana Method, which was a different brand, and I was taking it a different direction. But after I got out of prison, I was just like, I have to bring these stories to the world. Not just my personal story, which, people have said is impactful for them, but the guys that I know no one's heard about before. I just got to bring these guys into the light. Like, these are going to be unbelievable stories, and I'm going to give these guys a chance to be heard and put themselves out there, and hopefully I can help them, so.
Yeah, and that's just it too, because when you hear some of these stories on our shows, I've had a lot of people ask me straight up, this is bullshit. I mean, it sounds so out there.
That like, it can't be real.
Because right? You're going from this sometimes really good, upbringing to all bad decisions to shit, to jail, to this, to rehab, to wonderful outcome. And it's like, this is sound made for a movie or something like that.
100%.
And the thing is, it's called real life.
Yep.
And but unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't go that way. I've got a lot of people that unfortunately that I've buried. Some people haven't made it. So for me, it's important to tell that story, like you just said. You got first and foremost, addiction and all that, but still people. We're people before we made the bad decisions, and we're people during the addiction, and we're people during recovery. So, I mean, for you, man, I mean, you have firsthand, because you got locked up.
Yeah.
And what happened that, got you pinned up?
Well, first, I'd have to start earlier, right? Like, sure, I'm not a guy who broke the law habitually as a kid. I wasn't the kid stealing bikes and robbing candy, and I wasn't that guy. I was a normal kid, a Cuban kid from Miami. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. Both of my parents were very hardworking parents. Didn't make excuses. They provided for me. Although I was around the criminal element often as a kid. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but as I got older, I started realizing, oh, that's why he drives that kind of car. Oh, that's why he never has to work. And that's why this person has a 9-to-5 and works, and this person is like just hanging out at their house all day. So I put 2 and 2 together. You know what I mean? I had, I was around some family members that, had some drug dealers and some real gangsters, real guys. But, when you're young, you just don't know these things, right? So, as a kid, I lived a pretty normal, quote-unquote life. Besides the stories I heard after I grew up of like, hey, you remember that suitcase we used to carry around? Yeah, it had $100,000 in it. Okay.
Yeah, it's
learning about these things when you're like 17, But looking back, I wasn't aware about any of the crazy stuff that went on in with some of my family members, and I grew up pretty normal, a great childhood, 2 great parents that loved me very much. My dad, funny enough, who now has a substance abuse problem that he still deals with to this day. He actually was sober when I was a kid, and because of like me, oh, dad's so cool. He doesn't drink. He doesn't do drugs. I want to be like him. He's the reason I'm straight edge.
So you had the positive role model growing up.
I did.
And I know exactly what you mean. Here, people say, "Oh, you must have been surrounded by all this element." No, man. So it just goes to show you it could happen to anybody.
Right. And again, I was surrounded by it, but as a kid, you don't know these things, right?
And the thing is, too, is because they're our family and friends. So
right.
for us, it is normal.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I know my uncle one time, again, I'm correlating childhood with when I became conscious of what was happening. My uncle one time's like, hey, you remember that one time I went to like your birthday party and I told you to go play with the toys and I was like, yeah, whatever, what happened? He's like, yeah, I was counting, when the people walked in the house, we were counting 500 grand from a bunch of, like it's just crazy stuff you hear about. But anyway, so I'm growing up pretty normal, typical Cuban household. Spanish is my first language and like just typical Miami kid, growing up, trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And right after my parents get divorced is kind of like when my life starts, like when I start asking the important questions. Like, who do you want to be? What do you want to do with your life? Dad's not in the picture anymore. You're going to let mom kind of like figure it out on her own or what's going on? So the story of how my parents split up is in the introduction to my book, but I'll tell it here. So my sister was one of those kids that she's my older sister. She was one of those kids that was always with like her aunt or grandma. She was never in the house. She was always out and about. So the brunt of what happened during my parents' divorce, I had to experience, unfortunately. Up until that point, they had fought a lot. There was a lot of shouting, a lot of yelling, a lot of breaking of stuff. It had never gotten physical, though. Never. That night, I was turning 12 that year. I was 11. It was right before my 12th birthday. So it was 2004. The summer of 2004, I'm in my room. My dad is like driving around with me in the car looking for my mother, which was strange to say the least. I don't know why he would do that, but he pulls up to a payphone, makes me call my mother and ask my mother, like, where are you? Dad's asking about you. And then my mom's like, why is your father making you? Obviously the reaction she would have to make it involving a kid in that, right? So we go home. My dad and me go home. I fall asleep watching a movie with him. My mom gets home, and as soon as she gets home, it's like, it's fire. It's like the M40 going off, and they start yelling at each other. They start going at it. I hear plates break and glass break. I'm assuming it got physical at some point, but I didn't see it because I was terrified and I did not want to leave my room at all. And also, I just didn't want to see them. Like, I didn't want to see one of my parents hit each other just because I knew I wasn't going to see them the same after that. So I said,
oh, sure.
You know what? I don't want to see this. I know I shouldn't be seeing this. I shouldn't even be hearing this. So I'm just going to stay in my room. Eventually, my mother yells to come outside. Thank God one of my cousins was there that night and kind of kept them at bay. They might have killed each other that night. Who knows if he wasn't there. So my mom yells my name. I go outside, and they stop. I guess from seeing me, they kind of stopped. And in my head, I'm like, all right, how do I want this to end right now. So my dad's like, oh, I'm leaving. And then he's like, oh, come with me. And I said, okay, I could fight my father, tell him I'm staying. That'll ensue a fight. That'll ensue a bunch of shit. Or I could just leave with him and get him the fuck out of the house, and my mom is safe. And he's not going to hurt me, obviously. So I was like, all right, I'll leave with you. To this day, I always feel guilty because I feel like I abandoned my mother. And my mother has, on other occasions, we've gotten past it, but she did bring it up that she felt like I kind of like chose a side that night, which I didn't. I was doing it to protect her, really. But anyway, so I leave with my father and my cousin. We get in his it was like a 98 black Camaro. You remember the ones with like the bended?
Oh yeah.
I didn't. They were talking the whole ride, but all I heard the whole ride was Camaro. We drove for like 30 minutes, and I'm just like, man, life is gonna be so different now.
No, when that happened, when you said come with me, an honorable thing, man. You stood up at that. How old were you?
11.
11 years old. Now, was your mom, as you're going, was she, no, don't leave? Was it back and forth, or did she kind of
She yelled a little bit. She resisted. But I knew what was going to happen. I was like, I'm getting him out of the house.
At 11 years old, man, making that choice. God bless you.
Yeah. I mean, I've been lucky. I've been mature my whole life. I've been more mature than I needed to be because of stuff you go through. Everybody has their story. And the experiences, I've had to face them very young. So it just made me mature at a faster age. And I will say, I'm an old soul at heart. I feel I do believe that in past lives and that kind of stuff, and I feel like I carried some experiences into this life that weren't really mine, but were mine. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
you're in that Camaro and you got nothing going through your mind, man.
all I can think of is like, man, life is gonna be so different now. This is crazy. Like, that's it. It's over. My parents, which at that point I wanted my parents to split up because it was too much. They were fighting often, and I was like, thank God, all right, they're splitting up. But part of me was like, hey, it's really happening. Like, this is crazy. What's life going to be like? Yeah. You know, change is inevitable as a human. Changes, but we hate change, right? Even though we know it's going to come and you can't avoid it, we hate change, right? So anyway, we get to my grandma's house, which is my dad's, like, refuge. We get there, not 20 minutes later, my mom pulls up, but she's got backup. She pulls up with my cousin. Every Cuban's got that cousin they call a cousin that's not a cousin. With my cousin Louis. Louis, to give you some context, was an 18-year-old kid driving a Cadillac, a gold Cadillac DeVille, 1988 gold Cadillac Coupe DeVille. That was, if you were a kid in Miami, Cadillacs were the car. Like, if you had a Cadillac, you were a cool kid, you know? And he had it nice, man. It was gold, like champagne gold, and it had this brown leather interior, it's light brown, and these wooden handles. It was such a nice car. Anyway, so I knew when she brought Louis, I was like, oh, she brought the big guns. You know, she's like, I'm taking my kid. Fuck around and find out what's gonna happen if you don't let me take my kid. So as soon as I saw my mother, I was like, yes, okay, because I figured that's what she was gonna do. So I just walked out. I was like, all right, cool. I wasn't gonna stay with my dad. I never wanted to stay with my dad. Everything kind of worked out how I wanted it to. So I walk out, hop in my mom's car, and we take off. And then we end up staying with Louis for a while. We stay at his house, and then he ends up living with us because he's a little gangster running around in the street, a little thug, getting into trouble, starting fights and stealing shit and doing things he shouldn't be doing. And he gets on probation. And if he gets another strike, he's going to go to prison. It's going to ruin his life. That was such a crossroads for him. It's crazy now that I think back to it. But in spite of him being up to no good, it was good to have him in my house because he was like an older brother. It was good to have a male figure.
Got that role model.
He was an alpha. You know, he was a bit of a womanizer. So he had like certain things to look up to, kind of, not so much. Mm-hmm. But aside from all those things, what I really have to thank Louis for is he watched Scarface every single day. I'm talking about every single day. As a 12-year-old kid, that's not what you should be watching. I get it, right? But that was the first time I remember feeling inspired in my life. That movie, what it gave for me was, man, all right, obviously I'm not going to kill people and deal drugs. Like, I'm not going to do that. But that guy showed up on a boat just like my mom. Literally in the same Mario boat lift, came here to the United States, showed up on a boat with holes in his shoes, and 2 years later, he was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That's admirable. Like, if we switch drugs for the pharmaceutical industry or the car sales industry or whatever tech, he's a mega success. You know what I mean? So it was the first time I saw ambition. I saw goals, setting a goal, dreaming big, going after what you want in life. Fuck what other people say. Don't take shit from anybody. All these admirable qualities. It was the first time I kind of saw it in that way. And in another Cuban, because I didn't really know any successful Cubans up until that point. So the movie really, it was the first time I was ever inspired in life. And I was like, that's what I want to be. I don't know what that guy has, but I want what that guy has. The good stuff, not the bad stuff. Mm-hmm. I want that swagger, you know?
Yeah.
I want to walk into a room and everybody know that, you know, you're a boss and you have that energy. So around this time, my mom meets my stepdad, which this is going to turn into a whole another one of those. My stepfather's name is Alfredo Cordova, Cuban. He had just done 6 years in the feds. And he had no plan of slowing down.
Okay.
So it was interesting because now I'm 12. I'm not 4. I'm not 5. I clearly understand what the criminal element is. I'm very conscious of what drug dealing is, what's illegal, what's legal. Like, I understand these things. And then my mom meets this guy Alfredo, and I like him right away. He's a super cool guy. Takes care of my mother. Takes care of us. Kind of assumes that role. And he's a cool guy, you know, stand-up guy. Get to meet his son, becomes my stepbrother. And then I become aware of what he's doing. And I was like, okay, here we go again.
This pattern.
Yeah, like shit, another guy that like I'm kind of looking up to that's up to no good. So I'll tell you a quick story about what he was up to. I heard, I could never confirm this. I don't know if this ever happened. It was a story I heard. One time he followed a guy around for 3 days, learned his whole schedule, like when he would go to work, when he'd close up his shop. The guy he was following owned a jewelry store. He followed the guy around for 3 days, learned when he opened the shop, closed the shop, when he'd do drop-offs, pick up, all that shit. On the third day, he noticed the guy put a bag in his trunk. And he went into the store and he said, fuck it, I'm going to take the bag. So he waited for the guy to walk in the store. He popped the trunk open, took the bag, and took off. And that bag had 50 grand in it. There you go. Just like that. Fast money.
Cash.
Yeah. And that's the kind of shit he used to do. Rob drug dealers, whatever. Whatever made money, whatever made tons of money, he was into, whether it was drug dealing, drug robbing, you name it. He ends up, after a few years of, there's only so much you can tempt the law, right? He gets wrapped up in a case where a federal informant had him on tape talking about, in detail, about committing an armed, federal level robbery. He gets sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. So at that point, my mom was working, but he paid, I would say, a good chunk of the bills. Like, things were going okay because of him. He remodeled our whole house after it burned down. So he goes away. In the same year, my great-grandmother, which is my mom's grandma, dies. Like, several things happen. My mom gets divorced a couple years before. Then she loses her second husband, like pretty much her second husband. A lot of things come together there. We go through foreclosure after he goes to prison. 2 car repossessions. So my mom starts kind of like losing it mentally a little bit. And I'm the one who has to kind of like receive the brunt of everything because my sister was never really around. And my mom, I understood what state of, again, being ahead of my time, like I understood what state of mind my mom was in. She was dealing with a lot. So I never took it personal, even though it hurt. Like, it hurt as her son, like, damn, I'm your son, okay? I get this sucks, but whatever. So I would just let her go off, and like I wouldn't really try to like yell at her or tell her why she's doing this. And it got to the point where we actually ended up living in a trailer park in a really shitty neighborhood. And I remember it kind of climaxed into this one night where I went and I bought some Chinese food for us to eat. We were about to eat it, and I'm serving her. And like she started yelling at me with like food in her mouth. And like food was coming out of her mouth. And it was really weird and crazy. And she started like slapping herself. And I'm there, like, I just don't know what to do. I'm just letting her, I'm like, okay. And then she runs out the door. And I say, all right, dude, you got to go chase your mom. She's going to get hit by a car or something. Like, she's delirious right now. So I run out, and my mom's just sitting on the porch, just like bawling her eyes out. And I just sat there with her for an hour. And after that night, without having to say anything, we understood each other. Like, I get it. It sucks that we go through this, but we're going through this, and we're not.
It just got to that boiling point.
Yeah,
that was just it.
Yeah.
Man,
so
that's intense.
Yeah, as a 16-year-old kid at that point, 16, 17 years old, it didn't bother me to have to support my mother in that way. But again, it was like a reoccurring thing throughout my whole life. I always was forced to be in a position where I needed to be older than I was, and it didn't bother me at that point. So I was there to support my mother, helped her with whatever she needed. Right around this time, I got my first real job. I had odd jobs, but I started working at McDonald's at 17 years old. And then I have an ultimatum because my mother's actually moving out of town, and I want to finish high school. So I ended up deciding to move out on my own, 17 years old. So I was like waking up at 5 a.m, going to school, getting out of school at 2:30, going to work at 3, getting out at midnight, and I do that every day, So it was a miserable fucking existence. I hated my life. But, it is what it is. I had to do what I had to do to survive. Right around this time is when I found sales. And that's something that really instilled a lot of confidence in me, taught me a lot. Somebody approached me. I had never understood anything beyond having a job. I didn't know you could own a business. I didn't know you could be a salesperson. I didn't know like there was different ways of making a living as a human being. I just understood like get a job,
Punch in, punch out.
Yeah, exactly. So a friend of mine who knew, I don't know if you always had that friend that you kind of would always, I would always dream with him. Like, one day I'm going to drive that car. I'm going to wear this suit. I'm going to live in that big house. My mom's going to be retired. All that stuff. Yeah. Me and him would always talk about that kind of stuff. So he approaches me. He said, look, they showed me this. And I said, dude, yeah, let's do it. Because it was the first time somebody broke down commission to me. Like, oh, if you go do this, we pay you this much.
Okay.
I was like, no, that's better than getting paid $7 an hour at McDonald's. All I got to do is talk to a few people. Whoever buys something, I make, X amount of dollars. I suck at first, obviously, as with anything, when you first start, you're horrible. So what happens is through trial and error, I get better and I start making money and I start reading books and learning skills and learning how to talk to people, how to present a product. I learned a lot of good things. I become confident, build self-esteem. I learned how to talk to people. I learned a lot of good things in sales. And in that organization, I grew a team of like 3,000 customers, like 600 team members, 600 sales agents that all worked for me. And things were looking up. I mean, life was looking good. This is about my early 20s.
I was to say, that's young.
Yeah, early 20s. And then, I have a reoccurring thing where I'm around like addicts and criminals my whole life, even though I wasn't one myself. I don't know what to tell you. But the founder of that company had a really bad cocaine problem that none of us were aware of. So he marries someone who has an even worse cocaine problem. Oh. And then everything goes down the shitter. The company falls apart. And then I go from making really good money in my early 20s to having to figure out my life, which sucks, right? I end up having to go and do the one thing I don't want to do, which is work a 9 to 5. After you work for yourself and you make money, you don't want to go work a job, But I figured whatever, I'll do it for now until I figure out what I want to do with my life. So I end up getting this job at a health insurance company, making $15 an hour. What happens there, I start moving up fast because I had brought over the work ethic, and the habits I built up in that sales job, in that sales team, which was show up, work harder than everybody else, show up before everybody else, leave after everybody else. Learn, if you don't know how to do something, learn how to do it, learn a new skill, figure it out. If you don't have anything on your plate, support other people, figure out how you can help the team, become a team player. I learned a lot of good principles in sales. So I bring that over to corporate America and I start moving up. But what happens is I start making managers look bad. So they start pushing me down and stop me from getting promoted. So that started, I had already not wanted to work a 9 to 5, and me going in there with a positive attitude, trying to make the best out of it, it built a lot of resentment in my heart, which in retrospect is not an excuse for what I did, but now I understand why it happened, which led up to my whole fraud case. I hated the company and I didn't like the people there because they were keeping me from being me. What I should have done was just leave. Not, oh, fuck you guys. This is what I'm going to do to you guys. So basically what happened was I was flat broke. I was working at a job I hated. I didn't like anybody there. And I get approached. And it's basically like, look, bro, if you go to this clinic and you sign some papers, we'll pay you some money. I was like, I'm flat broke. Fuck it. Okay, I'll go do it. So I did it and I got paid like $800 just for showing up. I knew it was illegal, but I didn't think it was a big deal. I was like, fuck it. Oh, man, this is great. Then the guy approaches me again and he's like, well, if you know anybody that has the same kind of insurance as you, we could work something out. And I said, shit, we got like 500 people where we work out. They all have insurance. What do I got to do? Same thing. Just tell them, this is a physical therapy clinic. You tell them to come through. They'll sign some papers. We pay you and you pay them. Great. Okay. One person turns into 2. 2 people turn into 4. 4 people turn into 20. It just goes on and on and on and on. And of course, I got way greedier. I got way too greedy because this goes on for about a year and a half. Goes on for a while. And just little by little, I start getting my swagger back, not in a good way. Mm-hmm. So funny enough, this whole Tony Montana thing that I got inspired by as a kid is like, don't do it that way. I end up kind of doing it that way. Right? And I start making all this money and life seems pretty good. And, I kind of become what I didn't want to become. You know what I mean?
Well, I tell you, man, you were surrounded by it your whole life. And for you to hold out that long is a testament to you. But, it's almost like you hear, okay, you always hear that old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it is.
Definitely.
And you found out that it was. So you got all these people coming up. It sounds like a pyramid scheme going on.
Yeah,
you
somewhat.
get this person, that person. So
Yeah,
what happened?
Someone like that, yeah.
Yeah.
They show up at this clinic. They pay them for showing up pretty much. And I become a recruiter for this fraudulent clinic. So the way it worked was they would pay me a certain amount of money, and then I would decide how much to pay the person. So it could be anywhere. They'd give me anywhere between $1,500 and $3,000, something like that. I'd keep like $1,000 for myself, $1,500 for myself, and I'd give the other person $1,000 or $1,500. So the money starts coming in. It's easy money. At one point, I quit my job because I actually get approached by a friend to go into the weed business, which was really good. I'll get into that. And so I quit the job. I start the weed business. The weed business goes really good in South Florida. And right when I start opening up the weed business and things go well there, my connect at the clinic gets arrested by the FBI. So a normal person would say, okay, stop doing this.
I'm out of here.
Yeah, because up until that point, I didn't realize the severity of what I was doing.
You're thinking it's a crime, like local police and not the feds.
Yeah, I was thinking like, whatever, if I get arrested, I'll get probation. I'll probably have to pay a fine, whatever. I didn't think the FBI was going to get involved. Ignorance is not an excuse to break the law, blah, 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 blah. I get it. I'm not doing it again. So he goes to prison. He gets... And they revoke his bond. So he's in prison, awaiting trial and all that shit. I'm thinking, since he was the guy behind everything, he's going to go down. What I don't realize is he's actually the centerpiece. So he's not the owner of the clinic. He's a guy that knew like 10 of those clinics, 10 of those clinic owners. So he was the one that connected guys like me who knew patients, knew people with insurance, with the owners of the clinic. So he was the centerpiece. Everybody went down. But it happened right before the pandemic, almost like a year and a half before the pandemic. So what happens is he goes in, I go live my life. But then I get approached by another owner of another clinic after that guy goes away. And me, like an idiot, instead of being like, Nelson, I think you got off easy. You shouldn't do this anymore. The guy approaches me and he's like, you know what? I used to pay this guy like $4,000 a person. I'll pay you that because he's not around anymore. And me like a dumbass. Greed is such an interesting thing. When you see it in other people, it's like, oh, I would never do that. But then when it's happening to me, it's like, oh, I don't see anything wrong here.
Yeah. It's like I'll never do that until you do it.
Yeah. It's wild to say the least. So I with that insurance, we used to get a physical therapy benefit where we could do physical therapy twice a year. So I go back to everybody I had brought on, the 40, 50, 60-something people I had brought on, and I go back to them and they do it again. This time I made even more money. And people ask me all the time how much I made in that year and a half, and I honestly, I don't know. I made money. Cash that went through my hands, probably like $500,000 in cash, easily. I didn't keep all of it, but that's probably how much I touched. I don't know how much I kept. I don't know how much I spent. So the day I decided to stop doing this, when my conscience ate me alive and I said, no more, I can't do this, was a friend of mine calls me and she says, hey, Nelson, pass by. I want to talk to you. And this is just a friend of mine, a coworker who had become good friends with me. So I figured, whatever, she just wanted to hang out. And it's her and her husband. I knew her husband, her kids. I considered their whole family my friends. I show up and she says, Nelson, the FBI knocked on my door today. I was like, oh, shit. They came and questioned me. They didn't show me a picture of you, but it's a matter of time. So whatever you're doing, I'm no one to tell you what to do, but you got to figure out what you want to do. And I felt like such a scumbag piece of shit.
Did they bring your name up?
No, didn't show my picture, didn't bring my name up. But it was what I was doing, obviously, right? I had involvement. I felt like such a scumbag piece of shit for being the cause of the FBI knocking on a friend of mine's door. It was embarrassing. It was shameful. Because it's one thing for me to get arrested. It's one thing for me to steal money. It's one thing for me to do those things. But when my actions affect people I care about, that's when I drew the line. I said, all right, no, I'm not that guy.
You get that reality. Actually, that's when it becomes reality.
100%.
Up until then, it's just you know. There's no personal contact. There's no that personal. Like it's not family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
So these people, they didn't know what you were doing, or did
they knew? They knew what I was up to.
They did know.
They knew.
Okay, that'd make it even worse if they didn't.
Yeah.
And you were keeping it from them. But
Yeah.
I mean, it still doesn't make it right.
Yeah, exactly.
So here they tell you the feds are coming.
Yeah. And at that point, it wasn't too long after the whole first incident with the feds that happened where my name didn't get brought up. So I cut my losses at that point. I said, all right, enough is enough. That was June of 2018. So I go on living my life. I get into the weed business full force with a partner. That goes really well. We grow that into 4,000 patients in 4 years, between December of 2017 and July of 2021. My life is looking great. We're drawing out a strategy to go public. I left my criminal life behind. Stopped doing that. All the money that's coming into my life at this point is 100% legitimate. You can trace it back to where it came from. July of 2021 rolls around, the pandemic, all that. It was a weird time, but I decided to travel. I was traveling often at that point. I go to Colombia on vacation, have the best vacation of my life. I come back on a Monday, and I mean, I'm on top of the world. I had made more money than I'd ever made legally in that month. My stockbroker calls me up and tells me my stock accounts are doing great. He wires me in like 20 grand that month from profits that I had made from stock. Plus my weed business is doing well. Plus I'm traveling. Like I'm living the life that every man thinks they need to accomplish. Legally. I'm a respected entrepreneur in my field. I have great friends. I got family. I got health. I got money. I got women. What else you need?
Life is good.
Life is good until it's not.
Yes. Yes, until it's not.
So I get back from Colombia that Monday. That Thursday, I get a call at 5 a.m. 5 a.m. It's a phone number I don't recognize, so whatever, I just ignore it. I go back to sleep. But then I get a bang on my door. One of those. And it's my aunt. My aunt is my landlord. She says, La policía está fuera. The cops are outside. The cops. And they're looking for you, looking for me. Mind you, I had stopped committing fraud 3.5, 4 years earlier. At this point, I was about to hit the statute of limitations. I had forgotten I had even done that at that point. I was living a legitimate life. I walk outside, 4 City of Miami cruisers with like 10 cops, 10 City of Miami cops, 4 City of Miami cruisers with like 10 cops blocking off both sides of the road of my house. A Channel 7 news van, which I'll show you the video after we finish recording this whole thing. 4 FBI agent cars, like 8 FBI agents with AR-15s pointed at my house. And I said, what is going on here? I felt like I was Osama bin Laden or something. This is nuts. So all I could think of, I texted my business partner, told him, hey, I'm getting arrested. I don't know what's going on. I hand my phone to my aunt. I tell her, call my parents. And I just put my hands up. I didn't even ask any questions. I said, no one's getting shot today. You
don't talk.
Back up. They get cuffed me. They don't even tell me anything. They throw me in the car. They take me to FBI headquarters in Miramar, which is 30 minutes north of my house in Miami. I'm sitting there and I'm like, this will get cleared up. They're not trying to look for me. Whatever.
It's got to be a mistake.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm sitting in there. They bring me in. And then they start bringing in other people. As soon as they start bringing in other people, I was just like, oh, no.
You were the people from your past.
From the clinic scams and all that shit that was from the health insurance fraud. And I was like, man, they finally got me. Because the thing is, I had lost sleep over that.
So they rounded you all up that night.
Yep. Wow. All in one night. They said apparently because of the pandemic, things slowed down, and that's why it took so long to arrest everybody. But they got me last. They had already gotten everybody. I was one of the last arrests. And it didn't make sense because I was small fish. I was bottom of the totem pole. But whatever. They got me. So I get out on bond that same day. I get transported from the FBI headquarters in Miramar, Florida, to the federal downtown courthouse, which also is the U.S. Marshal Station. I'm in custody of the U.S. Marshals. I'm sitting in a jail cell in the custody of U.S. Marshals, and I'm just looking at the roof like, how the fuck did I end up here? This is crazy. This is insane. it's one of those moments where I was at a loss for words. I didn't even understand.
It's like it can't be real.
No. I was in shock. I was like, Nelson, please wake up. Nelson, please wake up.
Yeah.
Nelson, nope, not waking up. So I get out on bond that same day. I only spend 1 day in jail. And the legal proceedings, all that. But so what happens is from one day to the next, I go from being a respected business owner, entrepreneur, all these titles I gave myself, right, to being nothing. I didn't have any of that anymore. I get banned in working in healthcare for the rest of my life. What was the weed business? Healthcare. It had to do with. So I have to drop that business overnight. Wow. My partner goes and sells it, doesn't give me a dime. Overnight, I'm broke. I spend tens of thousands of dollars on a lawyer. Spend all my money on a lawyer. Overnight, I'm broke. No business, no nothing. And I come to the realization that, wow, Nelson, if you die tomorrow, there's no proof that you were here.
Your legacy is zero.
What you thought was important, it wasn't so important because if it was important, it wouldn't be able to be taken away like that.
Yep.
Things that are important aren't able to be taken away. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So at that point, I is the first time I really seriously thought the question, like, what do I want to be? All right, I might go to prison or whatever. I don't know what's going to happen there, but seriously, what do you want to be? Who do you want to be? What kind of life do you want to live? And right then and there, I decided, you know what, I'm going to write a book. Because even if I go to prison, I die, whatever, the proof that I was here will be here. Every great man that's been on this planet has written a book in some form. You know?
And that at least then there's be evidence of your legacy.
Exactly.
And your version.
100%. So I start writing the book in September of 2021. I'm out on bond this whole time. I published the book in March of 2022. I have a book launch where I invite a ton of people and I launch the book. I make like $3,000 that night from book sales and ticket event sales. And I said, man, this is cool. I could do this. Okay. So I was like, how do I do more of this? So I decided to start a podcast in June of 2022. So I start podcasting. Mind you, I'm still out on bond. I don't know what's going to happen. But I said, screw it. I'll do it. I'm going to keep living my life and I'll figure it out later. I'm not just going to stop living my life. So I start the podcast. In October of 2022, I was doing it audio only. In October, I actually start renting a studio, kind of like what we're in, and I start doing video. Right as I started doing that, the hammer comes down. Judge sentences me to 8 months in federal prison. Now I come up with a plan and I say, all right, I know when I'm going away, which was actually a relief. Not knowing was the torture.
Yeah, now you know the end game.
Now I know I'm going to prison, no ifs, ands, or buts. And I was like, okay, at least I know. I'm not relieved that I'm going, but I know, you know. So I said, you know what? I can make this podcast thing keep running without me. I don't have to be here. I'm going to record enough episodes and schedule them all to keep posting while I'm gone. And this thing is going to keep growing without me. So that's exactly what I did between October and January. October 2022 to January 2023, I recorded a bunch of episodes. And the last week before I went away, I spent the whole week scheduling it all. And I left it. And I kind of let go of it. And on January 9th of 2023, I had to self-surrender to the federal prison camp in Coleman, Florida, Central Florida, right next to Orlando. And man, one of the piercing images in my brain, the day I got arrested and I was sitting in that U.S. Marshal's office with the handcuffed in a jail cell, the only thing I could think was my mother. My mother's face just bawling, like crying, even though she never cried. But the image that I couldn't get out of my head was just my mother like bawling and being like, oh my God, how did he end up in this situation? And I swore to myself when I was a kid, I'd never burden my mother. And to me, burdening my mother is like, it's the worst thing a man can do. Because if you do that to your mother, you do that to anybody.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So the last image I have going into prison is me turning around, seeing my mom, my sister, my niece, and my nephew in the car, like waving. The door closes.
Shuts. Reality hits.
Strip search, spread the cheeks, all that shit.
You're now a number.
Yeah. Get dressed in prison clothes. I walk in, and this is my new home until God knows when. So another one of those sobering moments was that night when I was sitting in prison and I look up at the roof and it's like, holy shit, I'm in federal prison again. How the fuck did I end up here? You know?
This can't be real.
No, it's crazy.
Unbelievable.
But I shake that off after a day or two, and I start building a routine. And I say, you know what? All the bad habits that got me here are going to die in here. I'm going to build a new Nelson in here. And the Nelson that's going to walk out of here is going to be the one capable of building the life that I want to live and becoming the person that I want to become. That version of Nelson that's going to walk out of here, I'm going to be proud of. He's going to have the characteristics that I want. And that's exactly what I did. I read 31 books in 4.5, 5 months. I read everything from like Robert Greene to like the Iliad to a ton of stuff, just trying to get better. Read about Abraham Lincoln and great people, just people I admire. Worked out 3 times a day. Learned yoga, learned handball, played chess almost every day. Keep the mind sharp, you know.
Turning this negative thing, and that's just it. You took this horrible experience. Growing up, man, you had all these negatives, and you kept, by no choice of your own, man, you were forced into growing up beyond your years. But even in there, man, so that just shows Nelson Rodriguez, the man, the person, not the inmate, the person. So that's a lot for you.
Yeah,
that says a lot about you.
Yeah, it's
that's something to be proud of.
I am. I'm very proud of what I did with my time, and my thing was mind, body, spirit. Exercise the mind, exercise the body, exercise the spirit. So every day I'd play chess, I'd read to exercise the mind. I'd work out 3 times a day, exercise my body. And then I'd sit out and I'd meditate, or I'd sit in silence to exercise my spirit. Just go be with God. You want to know where I found God? I was sitting on a picnic table in a field in a prison camp in Coleman, Florida. I'd sit on that picnic table and look out at the field, and I would just feel nature. I would feel it. I can't explain it. I'd see the trees, I'd see the grass, I'd see the animals. And it was like, man, this is God. You know what I mean?
And you know what? And you just described it too. Here you are in federal prison, man, in a nasty ass place, but you just described something so beautiful because that was your mindset.
100%.
And that's what got you through this.
And I had to go there to be able to stop focusing on the shit that didn't matter, to focus on what was right in front of me and be like, holy shit, that's God. You know what I mean? Like, God, I had to go to prison to understand that concept.
That's powerful, man.
Very powerful.
To be surrounded by what you were physically in, that's real. That's 100%. Beautiful, man.
Yeah. So
jeez.
Then I start making friends, and I hear these incredible stories. Stories I found hard to believe. If I wouldn't have met them myself and seen it firsthand, I just wouldn't have believed it.
Did you ever think you'd be thanking breaking the law, thanking being arrested, thanking federal prison?
No.
Because I'm the same way. I was out doing a show, and I was thanking, I go, isn't it crazy? We got to thank addiction, actually, because of this. And this person got offended. Addiction killed my friends. I said, mine too. But addiction brought us together. Addiction brought these stories, these people together, brought My Fight Our War here. So we took this terrible thing and we're going to create something beautiful about
100%.
it. Just like your experience, man. So again, here's that same correlation.
Yeah, man. So
unreal.
That's pretty much the story in a nutshell. I get out 5 months later with all these friends, all these stories I want to tell the world, and I have all these shorts going crazy. I have some shorts going viral. It worked. What I planned worked. And I just started podcasting again. I met Ian, was on his show, and here we are.
I mean, it just shows the entrepreneur, man. Scarface. And what did you say? You know what? That's what I want. But I don't want the bad stuff. But you know what? If it wasn't for the bad stuff, you wouldn't be sitting here right now.
100%.
I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
100%.
So that, I tell you what, man, it's you're doing some incredible stuff in your story.
Appreciate you, brother.
And sharing your story. And then for your platform, just hearing yours alone, but now all the people that you've met and sharing their stories, you're going to really help a lot of people because there is hope. There's life. And like that's beautiful, man. What you just described, you go, you know what I found? God sitting on a picnic table in federal freaking prison. Yep. So that's great, man. I tell you, that's, I really appreciate you sharing this.
Of course,
man.
brother.
Of course, we've met, and we shared a lot last time we met, but there's a lot that you shared just now. It was like, whew, that's intense, man. I really appreciate it, man. And
best part is the story's not over.
No, it's just beginning. This isn't the end. This is just like with us. This isn't the end.
Yeah, bro.
The next time we see each other, we're going to be in Miami with you and doing that stuff.
I can't wait. I'm building the studio. I can't wait to have it done.
Yeah, we were talking about that, so we're going to be, we're definitely...
And I got some people to connect you with while you're down there. You could get some footage, some episodes
done. That as well. So this is just building that positive environment. You are your element, and now we're living proof of it, man.
Yeah, we are.
Man, Nelson, thank you so much for sharing all this. Before we leave, man, tell everyone about the new platform, the new brand, and the Nelson.
Alrighty, guys. So, Nelson Rodriguez Jr. You can follow me at Montana the Prophet on Instagram. You can follow the podcast at Honor Among Thieves Pod on Instagram, at Honor Among Thieves Podcast on TikTok, Honor Among Thieves Podcast YouTube, Nelson Rodriguez YouTube. That's where we're at. So give us a follow. You'll hear some real cool stories from some ex-cons, some former reformed gangsters, some cool gangster stories and criminal stuff, but you'll also see how these people have been able to turn their life around and are living great lives nowadays, and that honor, there is honor among thieves, and there's no point beyond redemption.
And that's just it, man. So please follow Nelson Rodriguez. Follow Honor Among Thieves, because everything is not what you see. And the more you watch his platform, his show, you're going to learn that. Just like, there's more behind addiction. There's more behind junkies. There's more behind that. And that's people. And that's exactly what we are before. And that's what we are now. So, again, thank you. And thank you, guys. So please check us out at My Fight Our War on YouTube, as well as Instagram, and at TikTok at My Fight Our War. And until then, guys, keep fighting the good fight.